Hi, everyone. I'm Lara Kinsey, and I'll be reading from Bump in the Night. So we're starting out in 1838, very early Victorian era. So our main character, Agnes, has been on the marriage mart for a little bit, and her family has become impoverished enough that she really can't afford another season. So when she heard other wallflowers talking about the eve of St. Agnes, she decided to give a little divination a try. So she's been staying up late, hoping to see her future, but she's just heard a mysterious noise from downstairs. So we'll join her as she goes to investigate. Agnes's hands ached in the chill air. She shivered. The fire had died an hour back. She could have stoked it, but the cheerful glow seemed like it would drive away visions. She could only afford one night. And she was spending it creeping about after shadows. Still, she didn't really expect to find anything. And yet there was definitely someone in the kitchen, and it didn't sound like Mother. She grabbed a heavy pewter pitcher for moral support. Agnes was used to seeing off all manner of villains. The carter's boy who'd made lewd jokes, the milkman who'd tried once to stretch his wares with chalk. He did not try it with her again. So when she caught a burglar in the act, there was nothing for it but to stomp into the kitchen in high dudgeon. She said in her most imperious voice, "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Most people descended to their earliest dialect under pressure, but Agnes became more and more articulate until spittle scattered with each plosive, and you could have cut glass with her consonants. To her surprise, the thief gave an upward jerk of her chin, as casual a nod as if they were acquaintances passing in the park. "Oh, hello, love. You've caught me about my mischief, then." The thief threw up her hands in mock fear. Agnes felt herself bristling with indignation. "We've little enough for you to take. Surely there are better houses to burgle." Though the shining silver candlesticks on the workbench hadn't been there when she went to bed. She doubted something so fine would have come into the house without her notice. It must be a prior haul, and she was dealing with an unrepentant master thief. She quailed for a moment, but the young woman was shorter than her and fine-boned. Agnes startled when the woman hopped down from her windowsill perch and advanced on her. She was so surprised she forgot to scream, but she dropped the ewer she was carrying. The strange woman caught it neatly in one hand. Their gazes caught. "Gave me a fright, you did. Why are you up at odd hours scaring innocent thieving folk?" The creature could have blown in through the window, so disheveled was her fiery hair. Agnes tried to muster some further offense at the intrusion, but all she felt was curiosity. She'd been waiting, she realized, for some hours, in the expectation of something magical. It's St. Agnes's Eve, when you wait to dream of your future husband. She suddenly felt very vulnerable in her night rail and long socks. Her peignoir floated about her. The chill air tightened her nipples to stiff peaks. "Bugger, I didn't know about that one." The intruder's grin showed the point of one canine. It gave her a foxy look, what with her fall of scarlet hair and her impudent posture. Hands in pockets, hips thrust forward, horrible boots firmly planted on Mother's Persian rug. Not waiting for a future husband, me. She could be a music hall chimney sweep. The fine bones of her wrists, her sooty lashes, the misshapen waistcoat. She radiated cheeky Cockney insouciance, but it didn't feel like play acting to Agnes. It felt serious, in a way that nothing before ever had. Realer than real, she amplified every inch of her body until the space was full of her jutting elbows and long crooked fingers. The candle flared up bravely and threw long shadows on the silver, the stove shiny with black lead, the thief. The candlelight seemed to pool on the thief, revealing apple cheeks and a deep Cupid's bow. She was short but dapper in her ancient waistcoat. It was rubbish bin grand with its scarlet print and silver frogging. She seemed to be someone who would catch your eye in a sea of people, not someone meant to skulk about at night. "And you are?" Agnes prompted. "Flash." The thief styled a little half bow, doffing an imaginary hat. "Just Flash?" Agnes blushed, but it didn't matter if she forgot her manners. There was no etiquette manual for housebreaking. She stretched out her hand as if this were an ordinary introduction, an ordinary woman in her kitchen at midnight. Flash seized Agnes's hand and kissed the back of it. "Just Flash." Agnes blushed to her very toes. She had lovely hands, strong and sure. For all her dirt, her nails were scrupulously clean. Agnes valued hands. Flash's hands were trustworthy, even if they had broken into her kitchen. That comforted her somewhat. Her tacit consent only seemed to encourage the thief. "How's your divination then?" Flash leaned her chin into her hand and bent her whole body across the scarred kitchen table, the picture of eager adoration. It was almost comical, but if you pointed out the joke, you'd break the spell. Agnes had never been looked at like that, especially not by someone so vital. Agnes focused on the candle's gleam. "You must be naked in bed for it to work. I've been afraid to fall asleep." She stole a glance at the thief. Flash noticed her, noticing her, and treated her to a cheerful wink. "Well, why don't I go with you? A fear shared is a fear halved." Agnes could barely hear Flash's footfalls, but every time she looked behind her, there was the thief, only a breath away. She floated up the stairs as if in a dream, feet moving automatically to avoid the noisiest parts of the floor. When she heard Flash whisper her name, she swore she saw the air beyond the candlelight dancing with green sparks. Everywhere they traced, the house grew more fine, until there was a shadowed splendor that surely hadn't existed in Agnes's lifetime. Am I dreaming? Her feet fell silently on the plush carpet, the familiar creaking muffled. Portraits in ormolu frames sparkled in her peripheral vision, their occupants in shadow. The hall grew longer, but she just put one foot in front of the other. The air was as heavy as great swags of velvet. Finally, Agnes pressed her back against her door and drew her first deep breath in nearly a quarter hour. Here were her old familiar things, her basin and her tooth powder and her silver-backed hairbrush. She shot a worried glance at Flash, but she wasn't looking at the silver. She was looking at the bed. It looked much grander by night, with its carved oak posts and its riot of pillows. The bed was shrouded in heavy curtains, faded though they were. One of the few remnants of the good life her mother always sighed over. Big enough for two, especially when one of the two was a rail-thin thief who looked as though she slept out of doors. Agnes had an old dressing gown of her father's, and she offered it rather bashfully to her visitor. "Maybe this isn't such a good idea." The thief made as if to clamber out the window. Agnes caught her hand. "Wait." Flash moved Agnes's hand to her scraggly cuff. "I'm all scratchy wool damp with nighttime frolics, and you're sun-bleached linen." Agnes grimaced. The thief's grin grew feral. "Not what I meant. I'm surprised you know about those nighttime frolics." Agnes shrugged in what she hoped was a worldly way. "I was meant to lie supine and await a feast." "And supine means in you're all together." "It does not." Agnes blushed hotly. The discussion of nudity made her embarrassingly damp. The chemise beneath her peignoir was growing threadbare, but the flannel was soft against her skin, a thin barrier against the night air. But the other wallflowers had been very clear. Nudity was required in every version of the tale she'd heard. She wriggled beneath the covers and flung her nightclothes off. She shivered. The linens had lost their warmth. So much for her dignity. But she'd done worse for a measure of control over her future. This was but one more small cut. Flash perched on the coverlet, one ankle on her knee. She smiled indulgently. I don't have a feast, but I have half an apple I'd give you, if you wanted it. She pulled a blushing pippin from one of her many pockets. It had a small bite out of it already. She offered it proudly. Agnes touched her lips to the place Flash's lips had touched. The softness it yielded up to her nearly knocked her over. She was having visions, and they weren't the least bit saintly. And then we get on to some spooky happenings in this little short tale. Things going bump in the night, if you will.